What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the Opinionated Hippie, continuing my deep dive into Neil Young's catalog with two more Greendale releases. I recently talked about Greendale, the studio album, which was released in August of 2003. Still kind of mixed feelings on it, not really sure how I felt about it. But now I'm going to talk about two live releases of the Greendale album. One that was released several months after the studio album, an acoustic version that was in which the album was performed in its entirety on the Europe tour of 2003. And then it was the tour itself took place before the album was released. The album Greendale (parentheses live at Vicar Street) was released about 4 months after the album. And then several years ago, back in I think 2020, sometime around the pandemic started, a full electric version of the album was released, a live version. On that tour that followed, Neil would play the album in its entirety in the first set and then play another set. So we have that live first set. And I don't think either one of these versions is necessarily better than the studio version. First, I want to talk about Greendale live at Vicar Street. I had hopes for this one because Neil, as an acoustic performer, is pretty amazing and can do a lot with just a guitar and a harmonica and a voice on his stage by himself. And there are some things to really like about the acoustic version. Both albums are literally every song on the official album done in order. So there's nothing new as far as sequencing or arrangements or anything like that. Maybe that's part of the problem. There's really nothing new as far as arrangements. I think maybe the best three songs on the acoustic version are the opening, Fall From Above, which just has an awesome vibe. It just feels good. It feels like the lyrics need the acoustic instrumentation. The energy is really good. It feels like Neil's giving a little more range in the way he's performing the song. I mean, it's not dramatically different, but it feels like there's something a little more invested than in the studio. It does feel like a little more like Neil meets a Bruce Springsteen acoustic as far as like the characters and the storytelling. So there's a lot going for the opening track. Then kind of the main problem with the album is Neil, before all the songs, other than the first one just starts, is explaining the story. And there's a lot of talking. And maybe the first time you listen to it, it's kind of, okay, cool, I'm getting a little more backstory. At one point, Neil says, this is like writing a book. So there's a lot of information. Problem is on the CD is the talking, the introduction of each song. It's not indexed separately, so you can't really skip it. And it's before the song. So instead of saying falling from above, the first song happens. Let's say you get 3 or 4, it might even be 5 minutes on the first song of talking. That 5 minutes is not at the end of the song, so you can skip to the beginning of the next track where the music is. It's at the beginning of the double E track. So you would have to like fast forward and stop it when you find the song. Plus he's like playing sometimes when he's talking, so it's really hard to figure out. So that's kind of frustrating. The other frustrating thing about this is it sounds like he's talking like really softly a lot of the times. You kind of have to turn up your volume in order to hear him because it's really frustrating. And then when you turn up your volume and the music starts, you're like, oh, okay, I got to turn down my volume again. So it's a really hard thing to listen to unless you have access to the volume right there because the talking is so quiet and then the actual playing is much louder. So it's kind of a frustrating listen. And I don't need to hear the talking every single time I listen to it. There are some interesting facts that he shares. He does say that the first, I think, 6 songs, Falling From Above, Double E, Devil Sidewalk, Leaving the Driving, Carmichael, and Bandit, were all kind of recorded in the same session or kind of back to back to back, and then the band took a break. And no, it was after Grandpa's interview. They made it all the way through Grandpa's interview because Grandpa dies in Grandpa's interview. Spoiler alert. And Neil talks about how he was kind of making it up as he went along, didn't put much thought into it. Obviously, a lot of thought went into it, but he wasn't like rewriting it and going back. He had this organic process. I think he even says, like, I didn't even know what was going to happen as I was writing it. We all felt pretty sad after Grandpa's interview, and then we took a break and we came back, and I thought, well, what about Grandma? So then he wrote Bringing Down Dinner. So there is some neat stuff about the explanation of the story, but I don't know if it's enough to like make me want to listen to all this talking over and over again. But the highlights, Falling from Above, just because it starts off the album so well. And then we finally get some really good energy. And the last two tracks, Sun Green and Be the Rain, which I also think are the highlights of the studio version. The arrangements are pretty much the same, other than the fact that they're on acoustic guitar. Bandit kind of loses its specialness. It's because it's the acoustic standout on the studio album, but here everything's acoustic, so it doesn't stand out. Bringing Down Dinner still has an organ, so that's pretty cool. He does get some laughs when he's introducing Bringing Down Dinner. So the Neil, it seems he's a little way too focused on the storytelling early, and as the night goes on, he kind of loosens up, and you get that sort of Neil wit that comes through a little more often. But like, I don't know, the blues songs early on, Double E and Devil's Sidewalk, just kind of, they kind of feel weird acoustic. They just, I don't know, there's something about it that doesn't flow as much. Leaving the Driving kind of has its moments. Nice little blues licks throughout. Carmichael, we get a lot more harmonica playing as opposed to like the guitar soloing that would happen. Yeah, and then Sun Green also just feels kind of weirdly chaotic, random, like the studio version, but in an acoustic way. I don't know if he actually has two mic and one is hooked up to a bullhorn or what he's doing, but there is like a bullhorn effect for some of it. But I really, really thought this, like hearing these things acoustic would make me invested in the story more, make me care about the characters more, but I can't say that I really do. I still think there are some powerful ideas that are present in Greendale, but the acoustic, you really have to be in a mood to listen to this. I think it has to be like where you can adjust the volume all the time. It's kind of a frustrating listen. That's the acoustic version. Then a couple years ago, he released the live version, and it's essentially the exact same thing as the studio version, only it's live. So there's little more increments of energy throughout the thing. We're not getting talking, we're just going song from song to song to song. Some of the songs feel maybe a little bit fuller. Some of the songs maybe feel like they have slightly more energy. As we get towards the end, I think Sea Green and Be the Rain, the two closing, which I think are already the best songs, have a little more energy. There are points when he really starts the guitars, he's like bending those strings and things are getting a little more like intense. But I think on like any other like Neil Young live release with Crazy Horse, none of these songs are going to compare to sort of the energy that's brought in your typical sort of Neil performance when he's playing guitar and they're doing the Crazy Horse thing. This is just for some reason, Neil views, I think the lyrics have to be the centerpiece. The story is the center. And so he really kind of keeps the music back and doesn't let the music actually just like do what we know he's capable of doing with Crazy Horse. Yeah, I didn't think the live version, I almost think the studio version, which is so committed to being tepid is a horrible word, so I'm not going to say tepid, but is so committed to the restrained sound and letting the music simply support it, that the weird moments on here where he does get a little aggressive with guitar, it almost seems like you're reminding us of what this whole show could have been when you do that. I think I made this analogy in the Greendale video. It's like you're eating a bowl of, maybe I didn't, of cornflakes, and somebody's mixed in 3 or 4 frosted flakes, and when you eat those frosted flakes, you're like, whoa, there's some intense sugar here, but then the rest of the bowl is cornflakes. And those moments almost stand out in a way that like that undercuts the value of the rest of it because of the disparity. Why am I missing that word? Disparity. Why does that sound so weird? I don't know. You know what I'm trying to say. It just makes the parts that are not trying to like be frosted flakes stand out more. So Return to Greendale is the electric one. I can't say personally I recommend either one. If you haven't checked out Greendale and you're interested in this epic story and you want to know what it's about, I would say check out the studio version, and you're really not getting much different from the other two. If you want to hear all of his talking on the acoustic, I guess, but yeah, to me both of these were just Not what I was hoping they would be. I was hoping there was a lot more fire, a lot more intensity, just something different. But they're pretty much just not carbon copies, but almost like very, very close to carbon copies of the studio album. Just they're done live. So how much you like Greendale, the studio album, will, I think, heavily determine how much you like these two. There are instances where I can say, hey, if you don't like the studio album, check them out live. Whole different beast. Not the case here. This is a similar beast. These are all zebras. You know, the stripes look different, but you have to pay really close attention to see the differences in the stripes, because on the surface it's like, oh, those three zebras look the same. No, there's tiny little differences in them. You just gotta pay really close attention. And this zebra over here, the one with the acoustic guitar, he just talks a lot more. That's the difference. All right, that's all I got to say about these. I'm underwhelmed by them. I don't ever listen to them. If I'm going to try to revisit Greendale and get Greendale, I think it's just the studio album that does it for me. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Greendale by Neil Young, the two live ones. Return to Greendale, parentheses, live at Vicker Street. Let me know what you think about these. I know there are people out there who love these albums. Share your thoughts. Subscribe, like, share, comment. And that's all I got for now. Peace. Talk to you later.